leads, and I'm here to teach you how to use the total gym for spine stabilization. As I discussed in the blog, I talk about variations and progressions that you can do with each exercise. I would like to show you a little bit of a flow in what those exercises look like, and then refer back to the blog of how you might tweak them for your particular client or patient. So I have the incline level down at the lower 1/3 edge of the tower, and I'm going to straddle, and I'm going to go into an inverted position. And as I discussed, the inverted position allows for some passive positioning in the spine, because when we start to do a heel slide, oftentimes people are arching their back. So the idea is that you give a little bit of assistance. You're not trying to teach them to be tucked. You're still encouraging that position of the spine as you're doing your heel slides or the marching, or you can do the traditional heel marching, walking out and walking back in. If this position is too much for someone, you can roll up and you can either lower the incline down, or remember you had the adjustability of the glide board, and still that little bit of a tilt for assistance, and repeat the same exercise. So from inverted heel slides and marching, you can then increase the incline depending upon where your client is. Remember, you straddle, teaching your clients to get on and off the glide board by straddling, bring the board up, and then go into a squat. The purpose here is, we've done squats everywhere, but really when I have my spinal clients is saying, I want this to be your driver, like that of Pilates, meaning that think about your pelvic floor, your belly, your rib cage softening. What are your shoulders doing? Are you initiating with pushing through your back and lifting the buttocks up, which is very common? Or can you keep this in a neutral position, this being your spine, and use your legs more? Again, if someone feels like they're flattening out, or they feel like they can't get down low without tucking under, if the client feels okay, you can bring their hips down and allow for that natural anterior tilt as they go down into a deep squat, and then pressing back up. Pulling the glide board down, rolling back up. I'm going to attach the arm pulleys. Now I see this often at our clinic. When people unfold and fold, they just leave the pulleys always in the same position, and typically it's right here in this middle portion. I'm going to encourage you to take a look at your pulleys and make sure that you position them where your client needs to be. An easy way, I tell our aides, is sometimes it's just the intermiddle position is a safety position. It's usually the most common position used. But remember, bringing up or down can influence where the pull, or rather where the intensity is greatest in the range of motion. So I attach the cable on. I'm going to lower down to the lower 1/3. I would like the focus to be on form. We can always increase the intensity. So grabbing a hold of your pulleys, you're going to straddle, take a seat at the lower 1/3, and roll onto your back. Do your best to encourage your clients to have your hands towards the mid-thighs, and then bend the elbows, because we're going to go into lat pull down. The other thing I really try to encourage is for clients to feel really independent in how to use the machine so that they can feel empowered. So letting your arms go back as far as possible. This might be a point where you recognize, wow, the shoulder mobility is highly influencing the rib cage. Oftentimes, I am cueing the rib position, everything looks great, and as soon as they get to a certain point, you start seeing that last lack of neutral spine. So, as I've said to other therapists, I love the fact that I can pick up things that might be affecting the issues at hand and then address them, like shoulder mobility. So moving on, you're going to lat pull down. In this position, you can add a bridge. You can add as well as marching. Whatever works for your client, but the focus here again is range of motion, allowing the arms to go back as far as possible while keeping the spine stable. And as you pull down, activating through that pelvic floor, belly, multifidus, all that good stuff with the core stabilization. Moving from this position, again, try to start with your arms at your thighs, because as someone moves back overhead, they may not have the range of motion. So if you tell someone to reach overhead and they're starting here, they can strain. And you go right from that lat pull down to lat pull over. Now some people add a little bit of a head lift. That isn't optional. If I add a head lift, I am focusing on, can I keep engagement of the transverse abdominis with the pelvic floor, again with the back. I'm not adding a crunch per se, because that's not really where I'm going. I'm working on, can they actually lift their head, which again, again, because I work with a lot of people with diastasis, the goal here is, can they lift their head? Because let's face it, if I have a baby, this is something I do with my little one, even when I'm at home. So can they keep this element stable? So you move from overhead, and pull over rather. So then you can also do alternating arms. Then you will roll up, scoot your bum back, and then now you're sitting at the top edge of the glide board. I place the cables between my upper arm and my chest, and then I have my feet on the floor. So this is what we refer to as self-spot. I will start maybe with one arm at a time, because as soon as you start to go to two, a lot of people either move forward or they'll move too far back. The focus here is on alignment of the head, shoulders, and hips. Is someone moving forward? Is someone moving too far back? Everyone's different, so you're gonna have to cue accordingly. Then if you want, you can go right into that low chest press with having the arms just pushing straight forward. You are welcome to have your feet here. Note that that's gonna reflect hamstring flexibility. Because you're inclined, people might be able to assume this position. You can also sit crisscross. As soon as you bend your knees, that does have a tendency for people to move back or to really grip in their hip flexors. Some people can do it, so don't not do it, but just know that that could be something that could happen. You're gonna move right from here. I'm gonna put my feet back down. I'm gonna bring my hands behind, and then I'm going to bring my hands to where the cable is running over my shoulders, and we go into overhead press. And the reason why I added this in for spine stabilization is because we do overhead movements, just putting away groceries, putting away your dishes, and you want to say what happens to that spine, and that is what you're training. Again, if you went to two, it's going to be a lot more flexibility and mobility. This is where the pulleys, moving these up and down, as I mentioned, might be more beneficial. You might want to move them up because that will help the person as they're doing this exercise. Moving down will pull the person a little bit further back, so they have to really work to stay upright as they move overhead. If someone's really long limb, remember, one arm at a time might be where you want to go to have that adequate cable length. So from here, straddle, stand up, and then we're going to move into, I'm going to bring the cables down, upper back extension. So the fact that the incline can move, rather the tower, as you bring the rails up the incline, it becomes easier to lift into extension. So a lot of times when we're doing any stabilizations, we're either on the floor or hands and knees, or using the wall. This is a portable wall in that I'm going to come up halfway, and someone can lie down. Hands can be here, hands can be here. They can be wherever the person feels most comfortable. And you're focusing in on lifting through the upper back. So this may be where you have someone. You can do opposite arm and leg here, but it's not as challenging as the floor. So in this upper back position, you can also, or this rather on the belly position, you can add toes turned out. You can add squeezing to get the glute activation. You can add, just in the Pilates, add a little bit of a lift. You can also just add, you can have a person position where they do a hip extension, knee bent or straight, extended. And then from here, I will also tell you, you can do the same exact exercise. I'm just going to come down in a low kneeling position. And I tell you this because the low kneeling position is going to encourage flexion of the low back. So when someone comes up, they're less likely to drive from their low back. You can say, I want you to keep those lower ribs onto your thighs as you lift up, really trying to get that person to feel the upper back, and then coming back down. Again, they can go wide leg if that's more comfortable for them. And then the other thing you can do in the same position is going into that hip extension if that heel squeeze isn't working. So moving back, I then will place one foot onto the squat stand, and I can be hands on my hands and one knee, or I can go onto my forearms and I press back. Now, I'm going to disengage the arm cable. So, as I'm pressing back, the things I'm looking for are the hips staying level. Am I engaging through the glute Where do I see that person driving the movement from? Are they just kind of pushing and not really having any type of activation going on, or just maybe a little bit more hamstring activation versus glute? Is the glute turning on before the hamstring? All these things you're looking for as you're doing what we think is a simple exercise as sprinters start. Now, hopefully that gives you some ideas outside of the box of what you're already doing with spinal stabilization using the total gym.